What's up, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the 5280 Podcast on the MHRT Network. I'm your host, Flippy McGee, alongside my co-hosts, Cameron Parker Pooh and Glenn Hauser. How's everybody doing today?
Doing
Pooh.
great.
Pooh.
Yeah. Oh, Pooh.
I'm pretty sure that's Poe, not Pooh.
Not where I'm from.
I'm going to buy, since it's December, I'm going to have to buy you a phonics set for Christmas. Just so you can learn things. Yeah, so that you can at least pronounce things better. I'm pretty sure it's like Poe, not Pooh.
I'm going with Pooh. Because it sounds
Did not need to know that, but good for you.
So obviously
when you've changed that many diapers, it's
Pooh's just everywhere. It's just everywhere.
It's everywhere.
So obviously we just had a game against the Texans. Big expectations going in because it would have gotten us head and shoulders above the rest of everyone else that's shooting for a wild card spot. Obviously did not work out. We lose 17-22 to the Texans. And to be fair, give credit where credit is due. The Texans played very, very well.
Yeah. You said it. I mean, you do have to give credit where credit is due, and that was the Texans played phenomenal. I think that's also, as much as, and again, this is a Denver Broncos podcast, but again, like, as much as we will probably end up talking about the Denver Broncos, is also so much that we should be talking about the praise of the Houston Texans, because we said it on the Mainly Broncos podcast, and possibly even here, it's like this was also somewhat of a game to a certain extent that also could separate who is possibly going to win Coach of the Year, right? And it's really important that we don't lose sight of the fact that the creators and founders of the Houston Texans this year, they drafted C.J. Stroud and they drafted Will Anderson, but who really helped initiate all of that? It was the coach and Broncos, interview candidate that they interviewed, and that was D'Amico Ryans. And I think, we have to be at least, give props to the Walter Penner Group for really giving D'Amico Ryans the time of day, right? And now you're starting to see why the players loved him. They clearly are getting results out of him. So that the Houston Texans are a team that is very quickly turning a corner. And I said it even before the season began. I believe it was on Mainly Broncos, that it was just like, it would not surprise me to see Houston take that Jacksonville Jaguars leap, a team that is in their own division, take the Jacksonville Jaguars leap and become a formidable threat in the very winnable AFC South. And you are really starting to see that. And it's in large part due to the play of what their quarterback has. I mean, no one saw what was going to be coming out of C.J. Stroud. They thought that he was going to perform like he is a rookie, but you cannot script what you saw from him on Sunday or even previous Sundays. He is playing at an MVP caliber level within the pocket, and he's making accurate throws. Like the pocket awareness is just it's special from a rookie, and like it is really special right now with what you're seeing from Houston. So again, we'll talk about the Broncos more, but just like you have to give props to Houston for what they're creating there.
And it's one of those teams that's now a young team, so they're just going to continue to grow together. His CJ is just such an impressive specimen out there. I mean, the just his pocket presence, the passing, his chemistry with Nico Collins, his chemistry before Tank Dell got hurt, just scary good. And that pass rush, Will Anderson is an absolute beast. I mean, he's given Russell fits all day, and their defense got the 3 turnovers that we needed. That's how we've been bouncing back the previous 5 games. It was not a great day as far as the Broncos go, but when you think that we were only 8 yards away from winning that game, you got to take some positives away that this team does not quit, and they nearly pulled it off on the road.
Well, and one of the comments I want to bring up from Avatar, I'm so upset with Singleton on his penalty. Now, to be fair, I thought the flag was initially going to be on Stroud for headbutting, but apparently not. Because he's a quarterback, I don't know.
The moment he shoved Stroud, that was the penalty, and he just gone mask to mask, and then retreated. Touching him, bursting through. Singleton was playing at an energy level that even for him was like sky high.
Mm-hmm.
But the moment he shoved him, and that was an absolute backbreaker, that would have been a fourth down play, most likely a field goal versus what ended up being a touchdown. And that makes a massive difference, especially when at the end the Broncos could have kicked a field goal to tie, or instead of needing a touchdown to take the lead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you would hate to kind of take the player perspective of this, because I would imagine if you ask Alex Singleton, and I didn't get a chance to hear his thoughts on the whole penalty, but like I would imagine it's one of those where I'm sorry I put myself in that situation and drew the penalty, and I mean that's kind of like exactly how you would have to take it. Is he put himself unfortunately in harm's way to get a penalty, but I think in the evaluation process of that penalty, ideally with CJ Stroud and Alex Singleton, and I phrase it exactly like that, is because I personally felt like Stroud initiated it. Stroud initiated that with Alex Singleton, and then Singleton retaliated. But we all know sometimes, like in those situations, it isn't necessarily the first move where the penalty is thrown. It's that second move, right? And so that's just the sad reality of it. So just got to be a little bit more disciplined. When you play with your hair on fire, like Alex Singleton does, you just got to be a little bit more disciplined. And it is something that has been reined in a little bit, of course, with this winning streak, is the discipline that you're seeing from this football team. And it is a little bit crushing, because Singleton was playing maybe his best game of his youngs, or of the season, I should say, that with Houston. And just unfortunately, just those types of plays just are backbreakers just in the overall landscape of things, as Glenn alluded to, because it could have been 6-0, but instead it got to be 10-0. And I think that led itself to where the Broncos could not afford. The Broncos could not have afforded themselves to be digging themselves up that big of a hole early on, because once they did that, that's when you started to see the Broncos pass it a little bit more and not necessarily commit to the running game, and that put forth, a little bit of some issues. And, granted, they were able to claw and fight their way back into it, which is kudos to Russ, but also we know that Russ didn't play his best game. Like, he did not play his best game of the season. And there were a couple turnovers that, you probably want to give more credit to the Houston Texans than Russ himself. Obviously, the one that he wants back is the last one of the last one of the game, and that was the one that sealed the victory for the Houston Texans.
And Buana mentioned that Peyton said he got baited by a rookie, and Peyton actually did say that. So he was Sean was pretty pissed off about that.
Honest question, was that a fumble that King recovered for a touchdown, or was the runner progress stopped? Now, I felt that there were a couple instances where they blew that whistle too fast. Like, the runner was still fighting, runner was still spinning, and they blew the whistle, and then after they blew the whistle, he gets another 3 yards. And I thought that happened 3 or 4 times on Sunday.
I mean, honestly, I think that was the Texans got hosed on that call. If the shoe were on the other foot, and that were the Broncos that had returned a fumble for a 6 point, and it got overturned on that, I would be pretty upset myself.
Well, and speaking of fumbles that were not recovered, Jonathan Cooper falls on a fumble and just bounced right out. Come on.
The worst screen grab of that entire situation was when the ball bounces as much as it did, and there's nothing but white jerseys. There is nothing but white jerseys right around the ball, and you don't recover it. Like, it's just deflating. And then, of course, that drive is when Houston went down and scored, their touchdown. So it was a deflating feeling, because what could have been if they did recover that fumble, right? Like if they did recover that, because now you're talking about a situation where the Broncos finally got their turnover, and you flipped field position and put your offense in a much more favorable situation, something we had seen in in these winning streaks. So yeah, just the bounces just unfortunately in the turnovers and just did not go the Broncos' way. And
that was right before that Russ pick, wasn't it? Fumbled, Cooper didn't get it, and then they punted, and then the next play Wilson threw a pick, didn't he?
I don't believe it's in that sequence, Mike. But the reaction from PS2 when the Broncos didn't recover that fumble was pretty funny too. I mean, he must have jumped about 4 feet in the air.
Yeah.
No, there was a lot that didn't go the Broncos' way in that game, but to be fair, it was on the Broncos as to why it didn't go that way. Multiple receivers being open, that's on Wilson. 2 of those interceptions, that's on Wilson. One was tipped, so I don't really count that one. The first one, that was tipped by Anderson, so I'll give him that one. But the last 2, those were on him.
Okay, the second one was a spectacular play. I mean, Stingley Jr., snatching that one before it could go over his head to Cortland was just a spectacular interception.
Yeah. You're putting more favor, I think, in praising Stingley on that than Russ slightly underthrowing the ball a little bit to Cortland, because that was a spectacular play by him to really make that type of play. And so kudos to him. And Stingley has been playing at just an incredible pace right now in the last couple of games. So that's not that's par for the course right now from what we're seeing. And to the Texans, they punched the Broncos in the mouth. They punched him in the mouth, and it started with Will Anderson. And the offensive line, maybe it was the biggest takeaway. They didn't do any favors. They didn't do any favors for the Broncos. I mean, people were in the backfield. Garrett Bowles had a really rough game. McGlinchey had a really rough game. I mean, it was the first time where we felt like the communication was off, even with guys like Lloyd Cushenberry and Ben Powers. I mean, it just seemed like it was off, and so much so that that there really felt like there was no identity, and with that miscommunication would lead to possible misreads with Russ. And everybody knows certainly how I feel about Jerry Jeudy, but if there is one game where you can pinpoint that Jerry Jeudy is open all the time, and quarterbacks, not to say Russell Wilson, but just previous quarterbacks don't necessarily find Jerry Jeudy, that would be a game, because he was open on multiple different occasions and the Broncos didn't find him. And I realized there was the 4th down play where Russ got the first down, but you're standing in the pocket and what seems to be looking around to Jerry Judy's way, or, and you don't throw the ball. There's some trust issues going on between he and Jerry Jeudy that, for it to be week 13, is a big problem right now. And, and so much so that it even led to the final drive. It led to the final drive where Jerry Jeudy has a designed route, I would imagine, like a designed route where Jeudy jukes a defender on a route and cuts into the middle of the field. And if Russ is able to hit him, it looked like Jeudy was able to just waltz in for the touchdown and possibly the game-winning touchdown as time was getting ready to expire. But no, Russ decides to hit maybe his favorite target right now in Cortland Sutton, who is triple covered, and so it's just like there is something amiss going on with Jerry Jeudy, where really the only play of the game that he hit him on was the 44-yard pass where he was just wide open. And you would think that after a play like that, chemistry would grow or Russ would start to find him more, but no. So there is just something amiss going on between him and Sean Payton actually let him have it, let Russ have it in his comments after the game, something I'm sure we'll talk about, but he let him have it.
And Jerry showed some serious fight, more fight than we've probably ever seen from him when he was trying to get into the end zone on that long pass there, Cam. I mean, he barely got held back, but that was one of those angry runs, you're not used to seeing it. But there were, on the offensive side, aside from the struggles with the blocking and There are 3 plays that really kind of changed the course of the game, at least for me. The first being on the first opening drive and Cortland Sutton dropping that pass. That was Russ delivered right down the middle, right in his hands. We end up getting a 3 and out to start the game. That would have changed the whole atmosphere, I believe, of the game. The famous play where Russ totally missed Jerry Jeudy and Jerry showing his frustration, like that he was wide open. I mean, that was an automatic touchdown. And then the non-call on Marvin Mims, that on that bomb, that was clearly pass interference, and it was not called, and that would have gotten the Broncos inside the 10, and guarantee 3 points at that point, maybe a touchdown. So just things didn't go the Broncos' way.
Yeah, and I mean there was even some miscommunication on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, the defense, for the most part, held their own and kept us in the game. But we did see McMillan get burned by Collins pretty bad in the end zone.
Everybody got
and then there was the miscommunication between Surtain and Locke. I think it was the first touchdown of the second, where he was just wide open and just ran it in real easy. And I don't know if it was them not talking or not understanding what play was called. I don't know. We don't know. That's between them and the coach. I have no idea. I don't, and this is one thing I wanted to talk to Gage about, because I was watching his live stream during the game, and he put that on VJ, and I don't necessarily know if that was a VJ issue or those two just weren't working together. I don't know.
I think initially, the way I saw it, it looked like it was just a really bad miscommunication play by PJ Locke. It just looked like he just misread what his responsibility was, or he bit on, the underneath route versus going after Collins on the help over the top. So I think that I want to just say that was probably just miscommunication from PJ, and not necessarily Surtain. Because there was no help over the top. So I would just say that, for PJ, that was just the unfortunate thing. And the Nico Collins stuff, it was frustrating. I mean, it was giving me George Kittle flashbacks against the Broncos when he almost had 200 yards, receiving against the Broncos nearly at half. But the thing that was just different about this one was it didn't stop. Like Nico Collins was just performing at just an elite level, like all throughout that game. And so that's just the unfortunate thing, is like the Broncos just didn't really make the adjustments defensively when they needed to. And just unfortunately, when they weren't making those adjustments, it dug themselves a pretty big hole. And they played really well overall. Like as the game was wearing on, like the defense, they did play pretty well. But just sadly, just the opening parts of that game really just really put them at a disadvantage just overall within that game.
And those 3 players that you mentioned, McMillan, Surtain, and PJ, did play major roles especially in the second half, to let the Broncos slow down the Texans from barreling down the field and really make it a game. And we had that scare where Pat was injured, and when I saw his leg go backwards, I was really surprised he was back in that game. And not only was he back in that game, he made a play at the very end that was just spectacular. McMillan, another, gets a fumble strips CJ Stroud. PJ Locke just had one series where he owned them. It was really exciting. Which leads to the question, there's no way Kareem is the starter when he comes back with PJ playing the way he is there?
You wouldn't think so.
I mean, you just don't know, because obviously it's irreplaceable to have veteran leadership. But the way PJ is playing, even regardless of what we had mentioned earlier with the miscommunication and the really bad play of no safety over the top, like even without that, like PJ's played at a great high level right now. So you cannot go back to Kareem. The one thing I will say, and this is actually something we've had the conversation about previously when Gage has been on, and it's about Kareem, is that I don't necessarily think you can take Kareem like 100% off the field, and like meaning like the Damari Mathis effect, right? Like taking him completely off the field.
No comparison.
Right. But creating certain situations for Kareem, right? Nickel packages, or, possibly using a 3 safety look, right? And him being that safety that's in the box, the safety that's possibly playing a nickel, or, a box safety, or someone like almost to a certain extent, like the Jamal Adams, type situation, the good part, not the negative off the field Jamal Adams part. So I think that if you can be able to create certain situations for that, I think that at that point you'll have the Broncos with what feels like an enforcer at that point. Not that Kareem was not an enforcer when he wasn't on the field, playing a little bit more than full time, but like you put him in certain situations, teams will know once Kareem is on the field, whether it's in part-time situations or full-time situations.
Yeah. So one of the big things that happened after the game is people started to talk about Russell Wilson in a negative way again.
Of course,
it's one of those group chats I'm in that was just going off, and like I somewhat understand at this game because there were some issues. Like there were some things that were on Russ where you're like, what the hell? But at the same time, like going after him because you're upset about his contract, that doesn't make sense. Like at this point, the contract's done. Even if he doesn't play up to the contract, it is what it is. He got extended for what he'd done in the past. It's over. Who cares? While in the same light, it's like, okay, we wouldn't have gone on that 5-game win streak without him. But I also feel like if we had another quarterback, and I don't know who that would have been, it would have had to have been someone that is equal to or better than Russ, and I don't know who that is. But if we'd had a different quarterback, I think that a lot of those games where we had to come back in the fourth quarter, we wouldn't have had to come back. We would have won by more, just because there wouldn't be the misreads, there wouldn't be the missed open wide receivers, there wouldn't be the not taking off and running when you should have. So I understand some of the Russ hate, but at the same time, like there are no better options out there. Like even if you're looking at free agents and rookies next year, there's nobody better that you could go get that would automatically come in and be better than Russ.
Sports Nonsense just made a comment that I'm sure you'll pull up because, Russ made some mistakes clearly, but he was under pressure all the time. Will Anderson was untouched several times in that game. And if you look at even the last play, the game-ending interception, Russ was under attack, even had to spin out. I mean, how many quarterbacks could have escaped that rush and even been able to throw at that point? So, like, we got to give some perspective to this. Is that it's who would have performed better in that situation? I mean, he's been so careful with the ball and made so little mistakes in the red zone all season. I mean, not just in the last 5 games, but just in total. But it's unfortunate that it happened, but the line needs to play a little bit more consistently, and they were really struggling on the tackle side this past game.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Mike, it's really important to say that, like, even for a rookie, if you were to put a rookie in that type of situation, I would imagine you're not going to get as much of the results that we had seen within that winning streak to what we had seen from Russ. And I get it, like, to see what you're seeing from CJ Stroud and then make the comparison of like, oh, a rookie could possibly have done better. Dude, have you seen what CJ Stroud is doing? Like we said it earlier, CJ Stroud is right now an anomaly. Like CJ Stroud is playing at such a high level that at a rookie, he's playing at an MVP type level, right? And so I think that for Russ, one of the things that while he did have a really bad game in terms of, the turnovers and possibly some really bad throws here and there, the thing I keep coming back to, and this is also maybe more so a credit to Sean Payton, but it's the marriage that both of them have right now. That despite all of the disparities that happened in that game, One, of course, which was the big one, which was no conversions on third down. No conversions on third down. And yet, despite all of that, they had a chance to win the game at the very end of it. Like, and I mean, the time management, we can probably certainly talk about. I felt like the timeout after the 2-minute warning was handled a little bit, badly. I will say that, but I do like the idea, though. I do like the idea of taking down that clock, the way Houston was playing, taking down that clock, and just you keeping the ball the rest of the way, and making sure that. And making sure that you had the ball to end the entire game, and just unfortunately we didn't make a play. But to Russ, like, while it may seem like a knock on him, it's also who he is, and it's something we've said before. Like, when he scrambles and when he makes plays out of the pocket as an off-script quarterback, he's made a living off of that. Like, he has made an absolute living off of that. And so the play of escaping Will Anderson, and like with what he's been able to do, like. He's made a living off of that, and especially, like, look, go back and watch the play with the Minnesota Vikings, right? Like, against the Minnesota Vikings, he stepped up in a crowded pocket. Like, he stepped up in a crowded pocket and threw the pass to Courtland Sutton, right? Or even the Buffalo Bills, when they were playing the Buffalo Bills, it was a 3% success rate for that pass to Courtland Sutton, and he made it. There are not rookies that can actually do those kinds of things. So I mean, like, so yeah, there are some definite knocks on him, for sure, with how he played in that game. But as much as we want to harp on him and call him an idiot sandwich, yes, I'm calling you out, Bleacher Report.
That was horrible.
I'm straight up calling you out, like Bleacher Report, calling him an idiot sandwich was C.J. Stroud, the one that is like in his face, like, yeah, I'm calling you out. Thank you for deleting it, by the way. It doesn't, change the fact you posted that, by the way.
Did
but
they
yeah,
delete that?
I think they deleted it. Yeah.
So
how that even made it? I can't believe. I mean, that's a professional organization. I can't believe that.
But like, so again, like this idea that while he didn't perform, and he's not playing at the elite level that we've seen, but like you do not, to your point, Mike, you do not win the 5 games that you have without him.
Right. And I think we kind of have to look at kind of what Glenn said. You have to look at the whole thing, right? Like, we don't know the insider stuff that goes into the plays, right? Like, there were multiple times where the announcers were like, he didn't even get through his drop before Anderson's in his face. Like, we don't know on that play where Jerry Jeudy's open what progression he is. Is he 3, 4, 5? Did he have time to get all the way through the progression? Because most of the time he didn't. So we don't know the ins and outs of that. I'm assuming that it was a mistake by Wilson because Sean Payton brought it up, right? Like, in his press conference. So I'm assuming that we all can kind of take the fact that that was probably on Russ. But my thing is, you look at, so Big E Broncos talking about J.J. McCarthy. I like J.J. McCarthy.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be fine drafting J.J. McCarthy, but J.J. McCarthy is not an upgrade over Russell Wilson at this point, at least as far as we know. We don't know. He's a rookie.
And he's not starting either.
At it, right. So you look at it, and it's like, okay, what's the best option? There are no free agent quarterbacks that's going to be available next year that's better than Russ. So what do?
Look at the Jets. They're illustrating your point, Mike.
Right? You pick up the option on Russ, right? You ride it out for 2 more years, let the rookie learn, then move on, right? Because people are like, we need to move on from Russ. Let me ask you a question. To who?
Yeah. What and we've had this conversation before, but it's just like that goes into the point where, with the contract part of it, but it's just like when we had that conversation, like, and it bears repeating, and I will repeat it because it needs to be said again. George Payton, yes, the guy that has been on the hot seat, and not maybe so much of the hot seat during that 5-game winning streak, by the way, but that general manager, George Payton, was the one who restructured or pay cut of Teddy Bridgewater, who had a significant contract at that time with the Carolina Panthers, shaved that to basically a 1-year deal for the Broncos. And maybe at one point was maybe one of the better quarterbacks that they had since Peyton Manning. He didn't play enough to, warrant having him come back, but still he shaved off that deal to where, you could possibly do some magical work. And I think that for George Payton, there will at least have a conversation of possibly restructuring the deal with Russ, possibly maybe a conversation about that. But I don't think it would take out this idea. I don't think it would take out this idea of possibly still taking a quarterback like a JJ McCarthy, and you have him sit with Russell Wilson, or you take. I don't think you could necessarily take a guy like a Bo Nix or maybe a Michael Penix, because I felt like Bo Nix, especially due to age, he would have to start right away.
Well, and you'd almost have to trade up to get him, depending on where Denver lands. I'm still assuming it's 17 to 23.
And even if it's Jaden Daniels, it's easy to say take Jaden Daniels and have him sit under Russell Wilson. Jaden Daniels is like the favorite to win the Heisman Trophy, right? And so it's just, and to that point, who knows what the evaluation process of Daniels will be at the next level, because people are saying that maybe he's like a Lamar Jackson. Well, if he's like a Lamar Jackson, he's not going to be a guy that's going to be started, or he's not going to be a guy that's going to be riding the pine pony under Russell Wilson. He's going to be a guy that's going to be wanting to start. So it all depends on the evaluation process of a guy like a Jaden Daniels.
So you got to do whatever it takes to get to the. Okay, so I can 1,000% tell you Denver will not trade up to 1 or 2. Not gonna happen. I can guarantee that one.
But the only way that happens is if you actually move on from Russ after this year, and you've exhausted all your options and you've done nothing, and you're aggressive and you make that deal to move up, right?
And we just got done.
And you'd have to give.
That's what I'm saying. We just got done at the beginning of the season talking about how held back the team was because we haven't had first round picks in the last couple of years. Now you want to trade them all again and do it again?
Right. So I'm just saying if that happens, you're going to see even more worse, discourse, that's on the timeline and everything. So, yeah, I think the ideal scenario, and this is something I've always, the ideal scenario, personally, is just you have to look at it from the Russ perspective. Exactly what you said, Mike. You have to look at it from maybe not, you don't restructure him, but you ride the Russ contract out, but you take a quarterback in mind and have him learn under Russ, and then give him the keys to the car after those, first couple of years. Because once you do that, you're obviously in a much better financial situation. And that even regardless if you are in a financial hell, if you will, you have owners that are going to get you out of it because the cash flow that they have. So it's you aren't exactly going to be in hell from the cap space or even the cash flow standpoint. So I think it's personally the best decision for you to take your quarterback still this year, but know full well, and it's one of the reasons why I've compared it a little bit to the Alex Smith situation, right? The Alex Smith situation. I know people are going to say, "Oh, Alex Smith, he was part of a winning team with the Kansas City Chiefs, and they gave it to Patrick Mahomes." I'm not talking about the winning record. I'm talking about the situation where they had Alex Smith and they took Patrick Mahomes, who, by the way, was not a surefire, greatest quarterback of all time when they took him. Oh, by the way. So, this idea that, they can take a quarterback, they let him groom under us, and then you give him the keys to your car.
Well, and this goes back to one of the other conversations that we had before was, let's say you don't have the rookie quarterback. He's not available. The one that you were looking for is not available. But the Bears take a quarterback in the first round. What happens with Justin Fields? Right? Is Justin Fields then an option in Denver? Do we go after Trey Lance, see if that works? I still don't, other than Justin Fields, right? I don't think that there is a potential upgrade at quarterback next year.
Yep.
And then the ridiculousness of someone throwing out, I think jokingly, the Mac Jones suggestion, and then it's kind of taken off a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think the Bears have to take a quarterback, and Justin Fields could be had for probably a pick swap or or 6th round pick or something. I mean, it's going to be.
Michael wants to know if Sean Payton is happy with Russ, or do we think Sean Payton is happy with Russ?
Well, let me pull up his quotes. Oh, there's a fair amount of them. His fair amount of quotes. This is after the game, and this is
No, this was actually the next day. I don't mean to cut you off, Cam. It was very interesting because I always, win or lose, I like to watch the press conferences after the game.
Yeah.
And the Broncos did not put the Peyton press conference on. It was only Russ. No other players and not the coach. And in fact, the comments you're going to be reading came from a press conference that the general public was not privy to either. So it's pretty interesting, and I wonder why that didn't get broadcast live.
So this is on targeting Kroll on the final offensive play of the game. Let's go reverse order. If you were listening to what I said earlier, I don't know what the last play was. I wish I could give it a name. Let's call it chaos. There was no shift, so certainly from your vantage point, it looks like, man, they're calling on tight end Kroll to be the hero here. I can promise you he was in a progression of 3 receivers, but the shift doesn't happen, and then we're playing street ball. What does Lucas provide? We feel like he gives us a really good receiving threat and speed down the field in a 2-minute speed 11 group, if you will. I don't blame you for looking at it at that play and kind of wondering where people are and where the ball is going. I was doing the same thing.
Okay, so basically broken play.
Yeah, and then in terms of struggles and pass protection,
that's on Russ.
And then the struggles in pass protection, it was probably 2 or 3 different things. There's push from the right side. You have to be able to stop that. Give them credit. They have a good group and a good group of young guys who can rush the passer. We leave a little early a couple of times, so this is on the offensive line. And then pretty soon your pocket is compromised. Now you're better off just being out of pocket. And from a consistency standpoint, I thought we handled some of the better play action stuff. Our protections were good for some of the downfield throws, but down, in, and out, we have to be more consistent there. And then this was really the comment. Everything got blown up this past offseason. Good question. They all stink. The losses do. They feel that way. They're just disappointing. What I said to the team a little bit earlier was, you're going to play 17 games. And are you going to be gunpowder ready for each one of those? I'm not so sure that you are. Yesterday, despite how poorly we started, you're going to be frustrated when you watch the tape and see the multiple opportunities we had. We let a guy run 3 early in the game on a punt rush. Defensively, we're off the field, and in a red zone situation, we let a rookie bait us into a personal foul. That was that quote. That's 4 points instead of finishing off a game, needing a touchdown where we kicked the field goal to win. And this is the quote. Offensively, we talked about it. Communication has to improve, especially on the road. Too many snaps where guys weren't ready, or we didn't get the shift, or we didn't get the call. That's troubling, especially this time of year. And particularly the communication aspect of this, right? Because that's when the offensive coordinator, right, Joe Lombardi or even Sean Payton, are relaying the plays to Russell Wilson. That's on Russ. That is on Russ. And I felt like one of the big things too that was in terms of communication during this 5-game winning streak, I actually was Glenn that you mentioned this, I believe it was last week, but how great it felt to see the Broncos in and out of huddle with 15 to 20 seconds left, right? And in that Houston game, they felt rattled. There were quite a few times where the Broncos got out of huddle and they were snapping with maybe half a second left in the play clock. So the communication and what you're seeing, they felt like they weren't even ready at times. In fact, even as the drive was winding down as the end of the game, the Broncos, there was miscommunication there, right? I think it was on that 3rd down play or even was it the 2nd down play? There was miscommunication all across the board from wide receivers and stuff. So I mean, that again falls on Russ in the communication from the huddle.
So answer the question though.
I think Russ. I think Sean Payton maybe at this time is a little unhappy with him right now. Maybe not so much that maybe you're going to move on from him, maybe, but I think after the game he was pretty visibly upset with Russ.
See, I think he overall is happy with him, and despite those comments, but I like those comments. And one thing about Russ is he can take it. He can be coached. He's always been willing to be coached. We had a head coach who was just a disaster last year, that no matter what happened would not have said anything negative or anything to this degree. And you got to point it out. He answered a lot of questions that we had, like what was going on that last play. And even Lucas, like he's standing there like with his arms up, like what's going on?
Right.
There were no timeouts left. So obviously nothing could be done at that point. I mean, the timeout at the end of the, coming out of the 2-minute warning would have been come in handy at that moment. But overall, I think he's happy with him because the guy works hard. He wants to please him. He generally can trust him. But he's not going to sit there and not let his thoughts be known if something goes south, because that's how you don't repeat mistakes. If you let people know, if you let people know that you're unhappy or this was wrong or this was done wrong, the likelihood of it occurring a second time is much less if you don't address it to begin with.
Yeah. Biggie says
think,
Russell
Mike?
Wilson. Well, so my thing is, and this, it's a little different because Brandon Staley kind of had the same thing, right? Like he had a press conference where he was like, the scheme is fine, the play calling is fine, execution is just not getting done. And like Rex Ryan, for as much as I don't like the guy, I'll give him one thing. He said, the one thing you don't do as a coach is throw a player under the bus. That's what you don't do. And I don't really feel like Sean threw him under the bus. I think it was more of like I recognize that there's room for improvement and it's things that we need to work on. So I think it was more of a shot across the bow instead of a throwing him under the bus. I don't think Peyton is unhappy with Russ. I think he's upset about certain plays that didn't happen. But every coach is going to be upset about some play that didn't go right during a game, right? Like, I think if Peyton wasn't happy with Russ, there already would have been some sort of change somewhere to try to fix it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Cam, do you have the quote? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Do you have the quote where he said, "Holy cow," and he was talking about watching Jerry Jeudy and how he's open like 2 or 3 plays a game and gets missed? That was another thing that he said in that same press conference to the beat writers.
I don't think I have that one in front of me. I have his on going 0 of 11 on third down against Houston, where he says, agree 100%. It's not good enough. Obviously, it's frustrating. It's a combination, a handful of things. Protection, guys open, us not making a play. I felt like the yardage and the distances were what we wanted. We have to be better there. Our third down plan has to be clear. It wasn't a game where so many of them were third and long, which is obviously where the Broncos found themselves in. So I don't have the Jeudy one, but yeah, that
he
one
said holy cow, actually, but
yeah.
But what's interesting about our discussion here and the comments on social media is that we were 8 yards away from this subject not being brought up again. It's such a fickle fan base that we're still 6-6. We're like, and we'll go over the final 5 games, I'm sure, but we're still 6-6 with a very good opportunity to make the playoffs with a super healthy team compared to some of the people that are in either the same position or ahead of us in the playoff race. So this isn't the end of the world. I mean, we still have an opportunity here. And I don't know about you guys, but I haven't felt this way watching a game in years.
Yeah.
Like I had to get off the couch. I had to move around and watch.
Yeah.
I was feeling nervous. Things haven't mattered, for literally
8 years.
years.
Yeah.
And the nervousness was exciting, even though the outcome was what I was hoping for. It just felt, when in retrospect, it felt good to have something meaningful to cheer for, and I think we're going to have that for the rest of the season.
Well, that's one of the things that, sorry, Cam, that's one of the things that Michael Carmelini was saying on Twitter was it's nice to have meaningful football in December. Because when's the last time we had that?
Yeah, and actually that is something that we've even said with the winning streak is like because of the timing of that winning streak, it puts you and vaulted you into playoff positioning. And that is something that they've not had in 8 years. Guys like Justin Simmons and, Garrett Bowles, like, all those players, like they're finally getting the chance to experience what playoff football is finally like. And we got a chance to see that in Houston. And despite all of that, you were able to have the last drive of the game where you could possibly go down and win, and so real quick, as far as like the Sean Payton, I actually agree with you. Like Glenn, I think probably just from my vantage point, it's like he was unhappy with Russ after the game, like the game itself. I don't think he's unhappy with Russ overall. So I think that, and just in the overall landscape of it, I mean, like we know that like there's moments where he's spoken pretty candid about how he feels about Russ in terms of that room. And look, if it was any different to what you said, Mike, if it was any different, they would have made a change, and it's to what we even said earlier. It's like, there's probably no other quarterback, too, that he would even trust in the red zone right now, than Russ. I mean, because you're probably not going to get the same amount of efficiency with a guy like Jarrett Stidham there. So, and that's the other part of this too, is like at some point, as much as we love the red zone efficiency, at some point that was going to probably rear its ugly head at some point down this critical point, and sadly it was at the end of the fourth quarter, or near the end of the fourth quarter. So that streak was gonna end eventually. But I think, to the point though, like they are playing meaningful football, right? They are playing meaningful football, and at the end of the day, they're not out of it. And I think that I was going to save this for save this for Thursday show when we do mainly, but I think we need to take a step back. And I know that before the season started, this is what you talked about, Glenn, in terms of like the playoff spot and everything a little bit just now, but it's like, we need to take a step back too and truly appreciate this season, the way it's unfolded. Yeah. Maybe some of us, were a little, orange colored glasses, or drank the orange Kool-Aid and maybe said the Broncos are probably going to be making a playoff spot. But to actually see it unfold a little bit, right? To see it unfold and the way it's gone down. And when you're fighting to the very end, a team that is fighting to the very end, that matters so much. Like that matters so much when you have a team that is vying for a playoff spot. Because when you've not had that for 8 years and you finally had the chance to do it under Sean Payton, that matters in the growth of this team, the growth of the team, just in terms of continuity and community. Like it is a big deal when you can be vying for that. So if they don't necessarily make it, but you see the results of them scraping and making it possibly that close to getting to the playoffs, that they made some big strides this year.
And
now, to be fair, sorry, go ahead, Glenn.
I was going to say, PJ Locke said something interesting after the game. He said, I'm not worried. I'm not worried about it. And then he offered the same point that we've brought up as well, that did I say CJ Stroud? I meant PJ Locke. That they played a terrible game and they were still almost going to win this thing against a very formidable opponent on the road. And he's like, I'm not worried. And if the rest of the locker room has that, the confidence that they had compiled over those 5 wins, this one loss is not going to derail them and get them off track here. They're going to continue to believe in themselves and then move on to a very winnable game this weekend against a team that could only score 6 points against New England.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, it doesn't matter how many 200-yard games you have if you're 2-10. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many under 200-yard games you have if you're winning. It doesn't matter.
But
I tell you though, it's my worst nightmare that the Patriots just continue to get better draft position. Yeah. Because when they end up with one of these top tier quarterbacks
don't fire Belichick,
they could presumably make something happen, and they don't. That's this fan base that I live among don't have to suffer. Is going to be just absolutely just as painful as the day the Seahawks threw that pass instead of handing it to Marshawn Lynch.
I disagree.
Whoa.
Yeah, I just
5-game win streak doesn't happen without Russ. Headline, capital letters, neon flashing sign.
Yeah, we said it. They don't. I again, like the play to Cortland Sutton. That's on the defense in the Minnesota game. That's on Cortland.
How about the play to Cortland Sutton in the Houston game? That pass and then that catch, that was phenomenal.
Or the Buffalo Bills game to Cortland Sutton. I mean, like, was that on the defense? Like, that was a 3% chance. Was that on the defense?
Troutman catch.
Yeah, I mean, was that Pat Surtain? I know he can play wide receiver, but was he the one that caught that? Like,
I mean, Wilson scrambling to get that fourth down. I mean, was that somebody else, or was that Russell Wilson?
And who threw the pass? Is Cortland Sutton so good that he threw the pass and caught it himself? Like, again, like let's not be too fickle here.
Well, okay. And one of the discussions that we were having in this stupid chat was look back at the quarterbacks we had before Russ, right? Bridgewater, Locke, Simeon, Osweiler, Lynch. Good Lord. Like, why are we sitting here yelling about Russell Wilson? Look at the quarterbacks we had before.
What quarterback?
Yeah, aren't you glad you're not part of this chat that he's referencing?
I probably have my own toxic chat.
Everybody's got one, right?
But like, what quarterback in the span of 8 years prior to Russ do you guys actually trust to be in the situation that we're in a 5-game winning streak? Not, like, there really isn't one, is there? Like,
no.
Well, like the same people that are like, oh, it's not Russ, it's the defense. 6 weeks ago, we're like, fire VJ, he's horrible.
That's right.
70-20. And then the Browns game was a complete group effort. We have our kicker won the AFC Special Teams Player of the Month, and then couple that so we don't have to listen to how wonderful McManus is now that Will Lutz is here, because McManus botched it last night where he missed the kick that would have made a major difference for the Jags in winning that game. So like it's been the turnaround. The defense has really shown in a major way, Big E, but it's been a very complete team-oriented win streak, with the Browns game being the one that really had all three aspects on the same page and just skyrocketing.
Yeah.
So I'll actually ask you guys the question that we asked on Mainly Broncos last week with this whole game, right? Because I think it broke from Pro Football Focus, and then I just kind of like took that question and put it onto our Mainly chat, which was, how confident are you, like, with the Broncos? Like, say, because they won against Cleveland and they beat Houston, what's your confidence level? And then what's your confidence level now that it's all unfolded? What's your confidence level now that the Broncos will make the playoffs with a win against the Browns and a loss against Houston?
Well, and this is one of the things that I wanted to talk about after this.
Dang it, I stole it. I'm sorry.
No, not that specifically, but what the answer I'm going to give. So I think that if you look at the Broncos and Chiefs game, you look at the Broncos and Browns game, and then you look at the Broncos-Texans game, I think that Denver is somewhere in between that. I don't think that we're constantly going to be as good as we were against the Chiefs and the Browns, but I don't think we're going to be as bad as we were against the Texans. I think Peyton will get it fixed, but I think we're somewhere in between. So I think that there's a very good shot that the Broncos still go 10-7, maybe even 9-8. I think 10-7 is enough, but with how this wild card slot's playing out, 9-8 could do it too. So I'm still pretty positive that Denver can come away with a playoff spot, despite
the 20% or whatever you want to call it.
Because you look at the teams that are ahead of Denver, right? You've got Indy, who's on a backup quarterback. They're up and down. You've got the Browns, who are on their seventh quarterback at this point. Like, they're
in his prime, by the way, in his prime.
Yeah, and you've got the Steelers who are on their backup quarterback, and they're up and down. They can't score more than 16 points. So there's a lot of maybes and potential downfalls for teams that are above the Broncos right now.
Mike, even take a step further. Trevor Lawrence got hurt last night. You know, Cincinnati, they won last night. They're 6-6. They're behind the Broncos in the standings, but they're on their backup quarterback. I mean, when you look at it, you know, let Miami keep winning, let Baltimore keep winning, like Kansas City, you know, whatever. Like they're going to make the playoffs no matter what. But these other teams, you know, I see us winning 4 out of the next 5 games. And I'm not necessarily convinced that Detroit is the game we would lose.
See, I was going to say the same thing.
I did weeks ago, but they're not playing overly. They're not playing the Detroit Lions game that was earlier this year, and the fact that they had to score a ton of points in the last 4 minutes to beat the Bears, then they lose to the Packers on Thanksgiving, and barely win this past weekend. You know, they're kind of on the ropes a little bit, but the Broncos should win 4 out of 5 and get into the playoffs. And once you're there, I don't care if you're the 7 seed or if you're the 5 seed, it doesn't matter. You know, like you're in.
I know I'm laughing, but like I have the scene in in Dumb and Dumber where Lloyd and Harry, they get to Aspen and he goes, "We're there." We're there.
There.
like, and I just like, just the visual picture of it, like, you know, obviously, like, you know, you know, the Broncos making the playoffs alone is just an accomplishment. So yeah, just to say we're there, like, would just be great. I think that the Detroit game is still probably, you know, the one that you're leaning to. Maybe that's going to end up being the loss. Like of all the 5 games, it's going to be remaining is probably the one that's going to be a loss. But I'm with you guys. The fact they had to, you know, scrape and claw their way back with Chicago and even lose to the Packers, which, by the way, I tweeted it that Packers game that the Broncos played is actually looking like a very, very solid win right now with them beating Kansas City and then now beating, you know, the Detroit Lions. That game that they had is turning out to be a really, really solid, you know, game. And obviously it's not going to affect the playoff positioning per se. Just what it will affect is their strength of schedule. Like it's going to affect their strength of schedule. And so if the Broncos can control their business, I mean, really the only team that they have, I would say necessarily to worry about would be Houston, right? Like Houston. I mean, and then if Houston continues on the track that they're on, the division is in their sights, right? The division is in their sights. So they could possibly win that division, possibly with what's going to go down with Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. Now, I think they said it's a high ankle sprain. Or it's an ankle sprain, so he may miss some games. I don't know about all of them.
I think 2 to 3 is where they got him at.
Yeah, so he may miss some games, but who knows with the backup quarterback what they'll be able to do with C.J. Beathard and stuff, you know, down the line. Because you can't expect like a Jake Browning game that you saw against Jacksonville happen, you know, on a weekly basis. Like that's not going to happen on a weekly basis. So I think it's certainly possible that they can win 4 to 5. The game and games, I should say, that I keep coming back to. You guys are going to hate me for this, but it's just because of the fact that of the game that we saw, which was 6-0 against the Patriots. I feel like we're going to get the Chargers. The Chargers are going to give their very best when they play the Broncos because it's a divisional game, and we know that divisional games are always emotionally tied, right? And let's all factor in too, with that game being 6-0. The Chargers are going to be juiced. Like the Chargers are going to be juiced to play really good football against the Broncos. You know, this upcoming I get it. I get it. The Chargers are not better than the Broncos right now, but like just in the landscape of 6-0, like you're not going to, you know, win many games that are 6-0. I don't know where that is in the scoregami, you know, charts, but I would imagine it's, you know, pretty high.
And like the Chargers are doing exactly what the Chargers do every year. They get to about the last 7-8 games and they fall apart. Every single year. I I think this is going to be Brandon Staley's last year. It has to be, right?
I agree with you, but the reason why it's also tough is because say the Broncos beat the Chargers this weekend, right? Say the Broncos beat them this weekend, which I think a fair amount of people will end up predicting that Broncos do beat the Chargers, right? But say they fire Staley after that game. Then you're talking about facing two teams at the very end of the season who will have new head coaches in your division, right? And we know, and we've seen before, just look at the Raiders with Rick Bisaccia, right? It raises the boats when you have an interim coach, there, right? So you can't overlook teams. That's why I'm trying to say you can't overlook teams, even if they're on their schedule and you may be the better football team. So the Chargers games just initially are the ones that do kind of scare me just because it's divisional. And, if you truly want to solidify yourself going to the playoffs, you have to. It's lofty, of course, but the Chargers are probably the worst team in that division. You got to sweep both those games.
Yeah. So looking at the standings as it is right now, you got the Steelers in the 5th spot, you got the Colts in the 6th, and you got the Browns in the 7th. The Texans are right above the Broncos at 8, Broncos at 9. We're one, and so 5, 6, 7, and 8 are all 7-5. Broncos are 6-6. So we're one game out. If the Browns lose a game and the Broncos win a game, we're tied. We go in over the Browns because we got the tiebreaker.
Exactly.
I really feel like the Steelers and the Browns are going to be the teams that fall, which would bring the Texans and Broncos up. And forgive me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the Broncos have an easier schedule the rest of the season than any one of those 4 teams above us in the wild card spot.
I don't know. The Steelers are.
The Steelers have the Patriots this week.
Yeah.
Well, but we got them in a couple weeks too.
I know.
And obviously they lost the Cardinals too, but they do have a pretty favorable schedule still. Just pulling it up, they have the Patriots, and they have the Colts. They have the Bengals now, which we know Joe Burrow's out, so that could be Jake Browning. Then you have the Seahawks, and then the Ravens to end the season, right?
They win all 4 of those. Lose all 4 of those.
All 4?
All 4.
So you think they go 1-4?
They beat the Patriots and then they lose the rest.
That would be great.
They can't score more than 16 points, and their defense isn't as good as it was last season before that. It's just not.
And one of the things too with the tiebreakers is if there has to be a game that the Broncos lose, if they have to lose one game, it really Detroit is the best game to lose because it's the only NFC team remaining. So we've got to also take into account the tiebreakers and the Broncos struggling in some of the AFC games already this year. Just the painfulness of losing to the Jets and the Raiders earlier in the season. It just, you just hope that doesn't come back to haunt you and that we're tied with another team and we just end up in the 8th spot because the tiebreakers didn't work out.
Yeah. And so the Browns' rest of the schedule is Jaguars, Bears, Texans, Jets, and then the Bengals.
Who's this at?
The Browns.
They lose to the Jags. Jaguars. I bet they lose to the Bears too.
You sure about that?
Yeah.
The Bears aren't as horrendous as we make them out to be.
No, they're not.
They got to be so psyched that they have the Carolina pick, and Carolina's just an utter disaster.
They'll probably lose to Houston, obviously.
They lose to Houston.
They'll probably lose to the Jets, maybe, depending on how their quarterback situation
That depends on Rodgers. I was going to say, he was just practicing, so it depends on Rodgers.
So it's possible. It is certainly possible. And then as far as what was the other one we would be looking at? Probably Jacksonville, right? Jacksonville. So Jacksonville,
I think with
Jacksonville's
Lawrence back,
but Jacksonville's pretty favorable. The only game I would say, so you have the Browns, right? As I said. So then you got the Ravens that following week. That's probably a loss. Then they have the Buccaneers
for the Jags.
Yeah, after the Ravens game, and then they have the Panthers, which that's going to be a win, I think. Lawrence may play, I don't know, and then the Titans.
That injury looked like more than a 2-week.
It did.
A 2-week sideline.
The Colts is the other team that's up there. Steelers, Colts, Browns.
So let's look at the Colts here real quick. So Colts are Bengals. Then they play the Steelers. Then they play the Falcons. And they play the Raiders. So the Colts finish with the Falcons, Steelers, Falcons, Raiders, Texans after their Bengals game this weekend.
Steelers.
So one team we should be rooting for the entire rest of the year is the Houston Texans, because I think they're going to win that division. With Trevor Lawrence going down, I think, and the Texans' trajectory where it's at, I think they win that division.
Yeah, and I think that there's every chance that by the end of the season we see a Colts, Texans, Broncos wild card.
Well, what about Miami? Miami's winning the division. Never mind.
Yeah. You know who we're not talking about? Buffalo.
That's right. And you know what? Because we have that tiebreaker.
I don't. So, like everyone's talking about, like maybe Buffalo could knock off Kansas City, but I think it's in the Broncos' best interest if Kansas City beats Buffalo. Just keep them a little bit further behind.
I also, and I know that we're running a little bit long, but I also want to bring this up. The Chiefs are not looking like the normal Chiefs, right? Like they're vulnerable.
Well, if we really want to get greedy and think about division, let's take a look at the Chiefs' rest of the.
Well, I wasn't even going to go that. Like I hope we win the division. We're only 2 games out, but they are not looking like the Chiefs, right?
So they'll probably win a fair amount of these games, but you have the Bills, then the Patriots, then the Raiders, the Bengals, and Chargers.
They're going to win.
I hope they go 5-0.
They're going to win all those games. Yeah.
What about the Dolphins, Cam? I know this is like a tedious exercise, but it's really interesting.
Oh, you're fine.
Our allegiances are like shifting on a weekly basis.
So let's go here to the Dolphins' remaining schedule.
Yes.
So
you are the only one.
So you have the Titans, the Jets.
Win.
The last 3 games of the Dolphins are going to be interesting. So you have the Jets. This is after the Jets. The Cowboys, Ravens, and Bills.
Whoa. Loss, win. I think they win the first 2 and win the last one, but they lose against the Ravens and the Cowboys.
If they beat the Ravens, they may be the number 1 seed in the AFC.
Well, they're the number 1 seed right now in the AFC, right?
Right. But that could also
the Ravens are second.
But that could also like get them the number 1 seed, like clinch the number 1 seed.
I don't know. There's a lot. It's going to be an interesting last month plus of the season. There is a lot on the line, and there are a lot of teams still in this.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's look at the.
I immediately retreating from that question.
Okay, so let's look at the Chargers game. Do we pull this one out, and by how much? What's the final score on this game, sirs?
Well, it certainly won't be 6-0.
No.
I think we play better. I do think we play better. And, one of the things that we didn't get a chance to say in talking about the Chargers is we do have their number, and we do have the Chargers number. And despite the fact that, they scored, 6-0 against the Patriots, like, who knows? And you guys said it, like, who knows what Chargers team is going to end up showing up. But I think that the Broncos do come away and they play much harder and more physical against the Chargers. And I think they come away with a victory. It would be nice to confidently say that they will win a game, by double digits, but I don't know. I don't know. So I will say that they will win 20. I will say they will win 24-14.
I have 24-16 Broncos.
I have 31-17 Broncos.
Holy cow.
And the reason why I say that is because I believe that after this press conference, Brandon Staley has officially lost that locker room. And we have seen a team that has played with a coach that has lost the locker room. I feel like the Broncos have the best shot at wiping out or blowing out the Chargers in this next game as opposed to the second to last game of the season, right? I feel like the second to last game and the last game for the Broncos could be those spoiler games. So I think this is the game where Denver can blow them out.
Man, so if they did put up 30, it will be, I want to say it's the second time that Denver will have put over 30 points up on the season. They lost that game. Frankly, let's be honest. Let's be fair. They should have won that game because there was a defensive pass interference penalty in the end zone on a 2-point conversion. So they really should have won that game. Of course, against the Commanders.
In the third, didn't we score 30 against the Bears?
Actually, we did. But as far as you're right.
So okay.
Victory. Yeah, so they're 1-1 when they've scored 30 points.
8-5. Wow.
On a bases loaded triple in the bottom of the ninth.
Yeah. They must have put themselves in a DeLorean and brought Nathaniel Hackett back for that 8-5 game.
Yeah,
speaking of Nathaniel Hackett, he has a new quarterback, a guy that he didn't defend when his offensive guard went after him. Brett Rippon, newest quarterback of the New York Jets. And we also need to recognize Garrett Bowles for being the Broncos nominee for Walter Payton Man of the Year this year.
Congratulations.
Oh, I didn't know that. Bowles is?
Yeah.
I'm okay.
Wow.
Congrats, but at the same time, I would love to have Simmons get another shot at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's just how you said just that. Wow.
Well, we all love Justin so much. We'd love for him. I mean, he's so deserving of actually winning the entire award.
I'm sorry.
I understand your reaction.
No, I'm with you. It's just to overall react oh wow.
Yeah, read up about what he does behind the scenes. It's pretty interesting.
Anything else that we need to cover?
No, I just know that sort of real quick about Garrett Bowles, he's definitely a big proponent as far as someone with a learning difference, and coming from myself who was diagnosed with a learning difference in the 4th grade, it means a lot to me to see someone support a cause like that, because I think that when with someone with a learning difference like that, people maybe look at you a little bit differently. You may be frowned upon, at times. But I think that, they're proof that they are human beings just like the rest of us. And they have passions, they have dreams, they have everything like the rest of us. And I think that, the more that we can see that they can have an impact in the world like us. I mean, so I love the fact that Garrett Bowles is, doing what he's been doing, in terms of, the National Institute of Learning Disabilities and stuff like that, and really making it a priority to, shed some light on that situation and, really make a huge proponent of that. So, and he's been a huge proponent of that. So kudos to him, and hopefully he can get a fair shake at the Walter Payton Man of the Year this year.
Yeah. All right. With that, we want to thank every single person that joined us in the chat. Michael Carmelini, Sports Nonsense Whiskey, Moose River Hummer. I love that name. Ray Haas, Biggie Bronco. Am I going to scroll up? Buana. I think I got them all. There might be more.
Moose River Hummer sounds like an elite gamer tag.
It sounds like something, but I don't want to have that conversation on the live chat.
I'll have the conversation.
But yeah, we thank everybody that joined us in the chat today. It has been absolutely fun. Make sure you check out all the other shows on the MHRT network. We got shows Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then the Neighborhood, which will be back against the Chargers game. I don't remember where I was going with that. It'll be back against the Chargers. Neighborhood's normally on game days. There we go. We'll close it that way. But again, thank everybody. We love the Broncos. We love Broncos country. We'll see you later. Peace out.
Fast lane when I pass in the street. Bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flight miles. So high, I might never come down, so what, this is my lifestyle.